All right, well, welcome to Rotary, everybody. We have a program today that is jam-packed with Rotarians going places. And we're very excited that even during a pandemic, you Rotarians are people of action and you are changing lives. To get us started with our formal hello are our greeters, Maureen Makita and Chip Topping. Please say hello.
Welcome, everyone.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to Rotary.
Thank you so very much for leading us off. I believe that we do have a guest in the audience today. I think Trevor Green has a guest. If so, Trevor, would you please unmute and have your guest say hello? All right, Trevor mentioned he had a competing meeting, so he may have been drawn away to that. But we do have a very special music and invocation selection today that Bunker Frank is going to take us through. So Bunker, tell us more.
Well, last Friday, September 18th, Rosh Hashanah began the Jewish New Year transition from 5780 to 5781, and the commencement of the High Holy Days, which are 10 days of atonement and reflection, also known as the Days of Awe. Yom Kippur, September 27th, is time to make amends, face-to-face if possible. On that day, we reflect on the new year coming forward and the blessings it may bring. The music selection of a centuries-old meditative song spoken on that day, Avinu Malkeinu, is recorded by the Park Avenue Synagogue, New York City.
Avinu Malkeinu, Shema
While our own Temple Shalom congregation is somewhat smaller, we do repeat this prayer with the same fervence and reverence. And I'll do it with translation, only part of it. Avinu Malkeinu, Shema Kolenu. Our Father most merciful, hear our voice. Avinu Malkeinu, Hamal Aleinu. Our Father most merciful, have compassion upon us and our children. Avinu Malkeinu, Kalei Dever Verashev Verav Me'aleinu. Help us bring an end to sickness, violence, hunger, and the pandemic. Avinu Malkeinu Kalei Tsar. Our Father most merciful, cause all hate and oppression to vanish from this earth. Avinu Malkeinu Katvenu. Inscribe us in the book of life, well lived. Besefer Hayim Tovim, and renew our family, our community, Kadesh Aleinu, and the work of our Rotary Club members. Lashana Tova, a good year. Avinu Malkeinu, our Father most merciful, Shema Kolenu, hear our plea. Amen.
Wow, Bunker, that was absolutely beautiful. Thank you so much for taking the time to put that together for us today. Truly lovely. Next up, I have some announcements to make, and Dwayne is going to put up a PowerPoint so that we can get that underway. But we have, as I said in our introduction, so many exciting things happening with our Rotarians Going Places right now. You know, if you follow our Yakima Rotary Club Facebook page, the Yakima Herald, or you watch KIMA TV, you'll know that our PR committee has been very busy promoting our Rotarians Going Places. Kudos to David Links and Quinn Dallin for helping share our good news with the community. I have a few thank yous to share as you enjoy some of the pictures that have been appearing recently in the local media. First, I'd like to thank all of the volunteers who helped build the new MLK Park Playground last Saturday. Past President Eric Silvers and Committee Chair Dan Sullivan were joined by over 50 volunteers to assemble the structure, and it looks absolutely amazing. And thank you to the Henry Beauchamp Center and OIC for providing the boxed lunches that were the fuel to keep our volunteers well fed during this construction. You absolutely have to drive by and see this magnificent playground. Truly remarkable. Next, thank you to the Yakima Rotary Trust Molly Monroe Davis Golf Tournament, all of you who supported those efforts, and all of you who have already contributed to their annual campaign. And thank you to all of the volunteers who collected food for Operation Harvest at the Fair Food Fest. Over 5 bins of food totaling over 4,000 pounds plus $3,000 in cash were collected because of your efforts. Our volunteers contributed 78 hours at the fair and gave out over 1,300 tickets to next year's fair. And thank you to Ward Sutton. Boy, he was going places on Monday. He went around the country club over 5 times and completed 100 holes on that golf course. Absolutely amazing. And he raised nearly $3,000 for Operation Harvest because of his efforts. Thank you so much, Ward. Now remember, it is not too late to sign up to support Operation Harvest. It's coming up on the 3rd of October, as you know. The bags are now ready for pickup, and that's going to be tomorrow at the YMCA and Rotary Aquatic Center. You're going to hear more details about that in a moment. But if you signed up to drop bags off on a route, please do so by Wednesday, the 30th of September. The big collection day, of course, as you know, is October 3rd. And also remember that in order to be socially distanced, the food collected that is put on the porch that is picked up then goes to State Fair Park, not the Salvation Army. So if you are doing a pickup, make sure you know that you're going to State Fair Park. Of course, there's still time if you want to make a cash donation. Just let Carolyn know if you'd like to contribute. And finally, thank you to Kelly Connaughton and David Links for scheduling a virtual Zoom news conference with KIMA TV to reveal the schematic for the new Rotary Playground at the Yakima Greenway that will replace the McGuire Playground. The new design features an agricultural theme to tie in with the valley, including elements such as the Yakima Peak rock climbing wall, some asparagus steppers, and a couple of tractors. We expect demolition to start sometime soon, so keep an eye out for that, and the playground build will be completed by next May. Now, tomorrow is a special day, as I mentioned. Your Rotary friends will be out at the new YMCA Yakima Rotary Aquatic Center from 12:30 to 5:30 tomorrow. If you need to pick up any of your Operation Harvest yard signs, those route packets, those bags to drop off, plus it'll be another opportunity to pick up your Rotary roster insert, remember that? And also Rotary wine. I'm sure that you could use another restock in your cellar of some Rotary wine. We've got both the white and the red. So come out and see us if you need to do any of those things, or come out just to say hello. We'll be socially distanced. We'll wear our Rotary mask. We just want to say hi. So please feel free to come by and say hello. Now with that, announcements are complete. So Sean Kinney is here to introduce a new member to us. Sean.
Thank you very much, Jennifer. So I'm very excited to introduce Dan Maycock to our club. Dan and I met a few years ago when he came back to town over from Seattle. So Dan is with Loftus Ranches. He is the VP of IT and data there. And prior to coming back to town a few years ago, Dan spent 15 years in data and IT infrastructure and data analytics with a lot of large companies from Boeing to Amazon to also smaller companies, and also worked as a consultant with Salem Consulting. And since he came back to town, he's been working really in the ag space. He worked at HR Spinner, where I am at, then Allen Brothers, and now he's at Loftus Ranches. So it's pretty cool how he's integrated into ag, and his expertise in data analytics is really unique and something that I think we're hearing more and more about that we didn't hear much about, just even a few years ago. So really, really fun to talk to Dan and hear about all of his experience. And I'm just really excited that he's going to be a part of this club. I think he'll really be a great addition. Dan lives in Tieton with his beautiful wife, Tracy, and two boys, Charlie and Henry. So anyways, I just wanted to introduce him and welcome him. And so welcome, Dan.
Thanks, Sean. Nice to be here. It's nice to meet everyone.
Well, Dan, it's a pleasure to have you as our newest Rotarian. You know, if we were in person, we would be giving you a standing ovation right now. So I hope that you can feel the energy coming across the wires there on that. And also, we would be handing you your copy of the Rotary roster, your way to find all of the committee assignments and information about members of the club, a wonderful plaque for your wall signifying your Rotary membership, a badge that is red that will turn to blue when you complete Rotary education, and a Rotary license plate frame. So be aware, we're going to be figuring out how to deliver that information and wonderful material to you. But indeed, it's a pleasure to have you, Dan. Welcome to Rotary.
Thank you. It's good to be here. Thanks for having me.
Next up, we have Mike Johnson, our Sergeant at Arms. Mike, are you there? If you're muted, please unmute.
Okay, thank you. I am I'm getting the sharing thing going on here, and you should see a big screen that says Fair Day. Am I right, Jennifer? Okay, awesome. So we would have been, at Fair Day, and we have a fair theme, this week. So you have fair themed questions as your Sergeant of Arms. The first of which is, what is the oldest county fair in America? Is it the 3-County Fair in Northampton, Massachusetts? Is it York Fair in Watertown, New York, or York Fair in York County, Pennsylvania, or Franklin County Fair in Greenfield, Massachusetts? Now I want to look at the little chat screen. I can't quite pull up the chats because I've got too many things on my screen. So you will hopefully be entertained to discover that the answer is every single one of them claim to be the oldest county fair in America. The promotional material for every single one of those fairs claims to be the oldest county fair, the oldest continuously running county, like they all claim to be the oldest. However, the York County Fair, or the York Fair in York, Pennsylvania, does have a scan of a founding charter signed by William Penn, the William Penn's son, Thomas Penn, dated 1765. So as far as I can tell, I think they win in the dispute. But everybody actually, apparently there's lots of oldest fairs in America. Who knew? How about this one? Which of these fairs commenced, come on, go, go. I'm not sure why I'm not advancing, forgive me. There we go. Which of these state fairs started after the Civil War? Okay, and the answer could be none, it could be one of them, it could be all of them, right? You know, Wisconsin State Fair in West Allis, the California State Fair in Sacramento, Arkansas State Fair in Little Rock, and Utah State Fair in Salt Lake City. Which of these started after the Civil War? Answer is only the Little Rock State Fair, or in the Arkansas State Fair. It was in 1938. Every other one started before the Civil War. The Utah State Fair, before the Civil War. The California State Fair, isn't that amazing? That's crazy. Okay, so last question for you is, what was the first year that the Central Washington State Fair was held on the current fairgrounds? Your potential options are 1881, 1892, 1901, and 1912. And if you guessed 1892, you are correct. The Central Washington State Fair began its run on its current fairgrounds in 1892. Pretty amazing. And so John Ball, I'm sure, is going to tell us all kinds of other wonderful and amazing things about our fair, but I had to steal his thunder just a little bit and give you guys that one. Our fair is pretty old. It's awesome. And I'm glad, I can't wait to hear what other stuff John has to say about it. So thanks for letting me be your Sergeant at Arms today. I hope that was interesting and fun, fair trivia for you.
Wonderful, Mike. Thank you so very much. And without further ado, I will bring on David Links now to introduce our speaker. David.
Great. Thank you, President Jennifer, and thank you to all the Rotarians joining us today. I'm pleased to introduce our program speaker for today, John Ball. I have known John for around 26 years. He was my babysitter when I was a toddler. Just kidding. I actually worked with him for 18 years at the museum, and he's still speaking to me. John is a native of Dubuque, Iowa, and moved to the Yakima Valley in 1992 when he was selected to be the director of the Yakima Valley Museum. I arrived there in 1994, where I walked in the front door of the museum and asked John if he needed any help. He apparently did. John will be talking about the Washington State Fair, which opened in the 1890s. He has firsthand knowledge of the opening as he came here from Dubuque to enter his prize pig, Buttercup. It was a long journey on the train to get here, but he not only won first prize in the swine competition, but he took extra money as a sideshow attraction. So over the years, John has become an expert on the Washington State Fair that has now become the Central Washington State Fair. John is currently Director Emeritus at the Yakima Valley Museum and now serves as archivist. John holds a BA in Math and Physics and graduate degrees in History, Museum Studies, and Administration. Please extend a warm welcome to John Ball.
Well, I was almost here. Carolyn, are you going to share the slides?
I'm not, but Dwayne is.
Oh, okay. There we go. A credit to the state, Washington State Fair. All right, next slide. The first thing I wanted to start out with is that we have this popular belief in Yakima that Yakima chose the state fair over the chance to have the state capitol and the state university. And I thought I would just start off by saying that's technically not true. Yakima actually tried for all of them. At that time, I think most of you know that it was North Yakima. It tried for the state capitol originally. There were three final contenders, Olympia, North Yakima, and Ellensburg. And if you read the newspaper at the time, when the election was coming up in the fall of 1889, you would think that the newspapers and some of the things that we see on Twitter and Facebook and whatnot today is pretty tame, because North Yakima and Ellensburg particularly leveled all kinds of nasty charges at each other. over the competition for the capital. We think now it's so obvious that it would be on the west side because of population, but in 1889 that was not true. There were certainly a lot fewer people on the west side, and North Yakima and Ellensburg actually made more sense than Olympia, being the central part of the new state. But what happened is when they did have the vote, because North Yakima and Ellensburg were so bitter rivals, they split the east side vote and caused a second election because none of the three communities got a majority. So in that case, we now have, and that's why we have Olympia. But North Yakima tried very hard. Well, it tried again on the university. And we're not talking about Central University, which was a teacher's college. We're talking about the land-grant university, which is Washington State, originally State College of Washington. And the reason Yakima wanted that was because not only did you get a big chunk of land, 190,000 acres would be given from the federal government, but also there would be $30,000 annually, big chunk of money at the time, and a construction grant. The North Yakima or the Yakima County Board of Commissioners even appropriated $15,000, again, a large sum at the time, to add to the pot, supposedly to help sweeten the deal, because there were three commissioners that were appointed by the new governor, and they were to choose between North Yakima and Pullman. Unfortunately, 2 out of the 3 chose Pullman, but North Yakima didn't give up. They sued, and they actually put a stop on building WSU for a while. Now, you people who are University of Washington fans probably would have thought that maybe that would have helped, but it didn't work too well. They lost. They were actually one of the first cases to go to the Washington State Supreme Court, and the Washington State Supreme Court ruled in favor of Pullman. The commissioners had the right to do that, and they did it. So when it came around then for the next big prize, it was the state fair. And again, we think now that the state fair, things like state fairs and whatnot, are not as important as these other things, just in terms of economic. But you have to think back in the 19th century, they were important. They were great educational areas. They brought a lot of people into a community, and they were a big economic driver. Now, contrary to what was just reported in the Sergeant of Arms, the first state fair was not in 1892. And I'll get into that in just a minute. Next slide. Agricultural exhibitions. Now, state fairs and agricultural exhibitions now seem to be kind of synonymous, but they were not technically synonymous. So the material they talked about the first fair, those of us who work in local history or any kind of history, anything that claims to be first, like the first baby or the first whatever, is always a little suspect. And most of the research about agricultural exhibitions tie it to Western Massachusetts, Pittsfield, and starting with 2 merino sheep, and finally founding the Berkshire Agricultural Society in 1811, which had all the hallmarks of what is now our fair. The competitive display of animals and produce, cash prizes, some sort of oration, some sort of parade, and an addition of a women's division. Next slide. But the Washington State Fair is founded in 1892, 1893, but we don't have a fair right away. What happens is that there is competition for that fair between Walla Walla, again Ellensburg, and North Yakima. North Yakima finally, and there are several comments in the newspaper about that, like in the September 1892 issue of the Yakima newspaper, it talks about Yakima strictly in it this year. This is the place that will definitely be the place that it's awarded. A state fair is established in 1893 by legislation of the state on March 15th, 1893. And this was the way it was stated. It's the object and purpose of an institution to promote and further the advancement of all agricultural, stock raising, horticultural, mining, and mechanical industrial pursuits. It will commence the last Monday of September of each year and continue for at least 5 days afterwards. So it's actually authorized in March of 1893. But as you can well imagine, it takes a while to get it established. Now this picture says 1895, but it actually was, the first one was in the fall of 1894, September 24th to the 29th. And you can see it has all the hallmarks. They have, this is the first annual exhibition. This is out of the newspaper, actually, to be held in North Yakima, $8,000 in pre-bid purses. Horse racing was a big part of it. There was entertainment, there were competitions, and they built the racetrack and the grandstand, which you see in this picture, along with the first building. Next slide. It starts in 1895. Mike is saying, don't believe any Fair's website. Well, it's not, it's not totally wrong, because 1892 is when they actually started planning it, but it doesn't really actually become a real implemented until 1894. But they built some of the first buildings, and we're pretty lucky because that building, the agricultural building, we call it now, was then called the horticultural building, and that's still the building at the fairgrounds. And you could see the inside of it at that time. The picture at the bottom is the machinery building. Now that's right at the beginning. They did not have a building. They did create a building, which was located where the Sun Dome is now located. But that was for the industrial things. There was no, the state, to continue, the state fair, this is a state agency. It's a state fair commission. It's funded by the state in part. I mean, they give some money to it and appropriate it. But for the next years, up until the 1930s, it remains a state fair. It's officially an agency of the state of Washington. What happens, however, is like all political issues, it kind of goes up and down. Next slide. This is the racetrack. You can see this was one of the first things built. The viewing stand is the little fun-looking building on the upper right, and then that's the track. It was modeled after the celebrated speed course in Cleveland, Ohio. And one of the things I thought was pretty funny about it, they said it was really, really wonderful, but one of the spectators writes that the country was more open by then, and that during that time of the fair in 1894, the wind blew like fury. It was so dusty that one could only see the horses when they started and when they finished. They had no idea where they were when they were on the outside of the track. But this was an extremely important part, and this was the original grandstand for the fair. Next slide. Again, you can see some sense of the ground. The horse barns are also early in the fair. There was appropriation buildings on the picture on the left. You could see you have the horticultural building there on your left, and the building that you see just on the edge of, that was the part of the machinery building, or the what now eventually became the Sun Dome, or the Sun Dome area. Next slide. And you see you have the same kinds of things going on. You have lots of competition. You have the competitions for the agricultural products, for livestock, for all kinds of things. Keep going. Next slide. Okay, move through this. And you brought things all in from throughout the area. One of the things, however, is, and I alluded to this earlier, is like all political things, the state sometimes funded generously and sometimes didn't. And the 1894 fair, although it went off very well, it lost money. And so in 1895, the state did their first time, they just didn't fund it at all. But the Yakima Commercial Club, which is the forerunner of the Chamber of Commerce, stepped in and they ran the fair just like it was a state fair, even though there was no state funding. And instead of giving prizes for racing that was in money, they gave prizes in terms of merchandise from local businesses and whatnot. And in fact, turned a profit, which the state, when the state had funded it, had they not been able to do. But they did bring in displays from all over the county. There was competition from the Interstate Fair in Spokane for produce and whatnot, but they still was it was pretty successful. And it remains successful. There are years of success from then on. Next slide. And you can see you see some things that are really pretty similar. You know, you have you have the lunch counters and whatnot. Now, of course, it's more finished and whatnot. The MWA was the Modern Woodmen of America. It's another fraternal organization, and they furnished a restroom for ladies. You know, the men did not get one. You can imagine what they did, but the ladies had their own restroom. And there was all the hallmarks of the normal stuff. There was all kinds of things that went on. They had, you know, as they say, a Midway. They had food booths, the agricultural displays, all that kind of thing. Next slide. And lots of really kind of fun stuff. When they built this is a little later, but when they built the new state capitol in Olympia, they did a model of it and a pretty, as you can tell from the picture there in the lower right, a pretty big one. That is totally constructed of Yakima Valley apples, which must have been quite the deal. And they had a lot of contests. One of my favorite ones was, of course, the 1 year and 1 year only. They had a contest hosted by Ditter Brothers store, which was a clothing store downtown in the block where Wheatland Bank is now. But they offered a handsome dress pattern for the mother of the prettiest baby. And they thought this would be a great opportunity. Well, the prize was won by Mrs. Elmer Schwartz for her bundle of human sweetness. However, the store and the judges announced immediately after they would never do this again because all the mothers who didn't win were not very happy and and complained bitterly about who was chosen. Next slide. But there were all kinds of things. There were curio displays. You saw the displays of the Yakima artificial ice. This curio display was kind of fun because let me tell you what it had in it. There was a tree, I can see, in this curio and relic booth. There was an old-fashioned spinning wheel, a 1777 silk picture, my favorite, a coffee bean from a tree planted by George Washington in Mount Vernon, a magnolia blossom from a tree planted by General Lafayette, also at Mount Vernon, and a sword carried in the Battle of Waterloo, all next to a handmade corset worn 75 years ago. Assumingly, the woman was not there also, but the corset was. Next slide. And again, more of the same kind of thing, much the same kind of thing you see today. You see the different products and the different things. There was a photography contest, a picture contest, along with a lot of the other things. Next slide. And then just to give you some kind of overview, this is roughly about 1920. And if you think about the large building right in the center is the agricultural building, what we now call the agricultural building. And the small building that's right in the foreground there was the women's building, which I'll talk more about later. The long building beyond was the agricultural machinery, and then you see the racetrack and the horse barns off to your right, and of course the midway off to the left. It's not distinctly different from what you see now, except that it's obviously much more built up and much more developed. But it is the same piece of property that they got in 1894. Next slide. They also begin to have traffic jams, just like now, and they brought the trolley system out to the fairgrounds. There was one kind of amusing anecdote during one of the times before the trolley came out. They used to have private vendors who they would award a contract to bring people down from downtown Yakima. Because now we don't think it's very far away, but it's actually about 2 miles from downtown Yakima. And they would, and they decided one year that these people were charging too much for it, and so they allowed anybody who wanted to bring people in and do compete commercial companies. It only lasted 1 year, but I guess it was kind of a rat race, so to speak. Go ahead, one more slide. Next slide. This is the women's building, and I'll speak to this just briefly. This was on basically the site of where this building is now. We call the, but the women's building, which is on the left, the original one, burned in 1924. And in 1925, the legislature did appropriate enough money to build a new one, and that's what the one we now have there right now. 1924, by the way, was one of the few years there was no fair. There was a hoof and mouth disease outbreak in the state, and there was no state fair. Next slide. And you can see again a lot of the things that were all going on. They had the shows. Horse racing was a huge deal right from the beginning. They got stock car races, you know, all the kinds of advertisements and whatnot we now see today. Keep going. Next slide. Again, races. You can see that again a lot of the similar kinds of things. Monday is Automobile Day. There's a Flag Day, Yakima Tacoma Day, Seattle and Elks Day, Automobile Fraternity Day. All kinds of different things from that. All in these. This is all in the first years of the fair. Next slide. Now we begin to see a change, because what happens is there's no fair of any kind. In 1924, there's no state fair. They have a Harvest Home Festival instead. And in 1932 is the last fair that's funded by the state. As we all know, the 30s was the time of the Depression, the Great Depression. And after the fair was funded by the state in 1932, they said there was no more money. And in 1933-34, the local JCs stepped up and ran a fair called the Mid-Valley Fair. In 1935, under the Works Progress Administration, the Federal Housing Administration did a fair on housing and federal housing programs through the WPA of the Roosevelt administration. And in 1936, even though the state fair fund had been abolished and the State Fair Commission was gone, they did appropriate money out of the general fund in 1936 for a state fair. That was the last official Washington State Fair. In 1937 to 38, however, there was the state 4-H club came in, and they did much the same kinds of things. They had competitions, but it was all youth-based. And the building that we now call the Modern Living Building was actually built as this Boys and Girls Club building in 1937 with funds from the federal government. And the center part, when you first go in to that building, that used to be the show place for livestock. It was sunken, and the upstairs were dormitories. Next slide. That's this building. Next slide. In 1939, however, a group of people got together and founded the Central Washington State Fair, Central Washington Fair Association, and that's what we've had ever since. So you have really kind of three periods. You have the state period, then you have this period in the 30s, which has a bunch of organizations kind of vying but keeping it going until the State Fair Association is founded in 1939. Next slide. What happens, World War II comes along, and once World War II hits, there are no fairs anywhere in the country. They are canceled. And so there's no fair in 42, 43, 44, 45. But during that time, the fairgrounds actually played a fairly important role in the fair, in the World War II effort. One, the Kenworth truck, which was made on, which was in a plant in Seattle where Boeing Field is, was displaced because Boeing Field needed to be expanded. And so Kenworth trucks were actually made on the fairgrounds. Half of them went to the commercial market or the local market, domestic market, but the other half went for the Burma Road in Asia. And that's what those pictures are on the right. Fairgrounds was also a place where there were a lot of war bond drives, bond rallies, things of that nature. There were stock car races. We also had Army convoy stopovers going from basically from Fort Lewis to Pendleton. The Army Air Force was there, and then Navy V-5 cadets, which actually learned to pilot at the airport but they were housed at the fairgrounds. Next slide. But when it was over, the fair takes off in great steam, and you begin to see what it's like right away after that. They had again all the hallmarks. Next slide. And you'll see all kinds of, all the same kind of things. Greg is on there, and I'm sure they always have to come up with some kind of theme or whatnot that they call it. And every year since then, there have really only been, until the present day, 3 presidents or managers or CEO of the fair. Hugh King, there was a woman in the very first years or so, but then Hugh King took over and served until Greg took over. And I believe you were 73, I think, Greg. And then, of course, he just retired. Next slide. I had all kinds of competitions, just like always, just like all of them. One of my favorite ones, which I'm sure would be really popular right now, is they had sewing contests and all kinds of domestic contests for the women. My favorite one was there was a very, very highly sought contest for how fast a woman could iron her husband's shirt and to get it ready to go to work. So I'm sure you get a lot of entries for that right now. So whatever. I know Jennifer would be there for sure. Next slide. Again, these are just advertisements. You can see the fairgrounds very much as it looks today. Next slide. One of the great things about the fair that people will talk about the 50s and 60s was this toy train or small railroad, which ran in the center part of the fairgrounds, kind of that central green. And next slide. And they also had the various problems. The grandstand burned out in 1955. That led to the building of the present grandstand, which also led to the establishment of Yakima Meadows and the pari-mutuel betting racetrack. They had log cabins. There were 3 successive ones of the fairgrounds, all of which burned or were destroyed in one way, shape, or another. Next slide. And they also had other things. I think, as we all know, there are things that go on those fairgrounds all the time. There's the Nazarene Camp Meeting. I love this one of all the Airstream trailers. There were camp meetings. There were Montana Picnic is one. A lot of communities, Yakima being one, we forget about this now, but there used to be clubs made up of people who had come here from various other parts of the country. There used to be an Illinois club of North Yakima. There used to be an Iowa club. This happens to be the Montana Club. We don't even think about that anymore, where our ancestors came from, but there used to be pretty popular. And so the fairgrounds, as today, continues to be used for lots of different things. Next slide. Entertainment is always a part. I love this one, the Carnival of Naples and the eruption of Vesuvius, world's greatest open-air amusement creation. I loved the fact that every night there was a thrilling eruption of a volcano. They also always talk about how many beautiful girls there are. Next slide. Again, different kinds, balloon, hot air balloon expositions, bands, Native American displays, or parades, all kinds of different entertainments in the early years. Now, next slide. Rodeo. A lot of people say this is Yakima Canute, but it's never been really proven that that is. And Yakima Canute was not from Yakima anyway. He was from Colfax. He just liked it here. Next slide. And again, these are some of the more popular ones. That's Roy Rogers down on the bottom. We have John Davidson, the Mills Brothers. Dolly Parton has been here. Meeker shows have been here for years and years and years. Fess Parker, and a lot of big name entertainers that would come to the Yakima Fair. This was a major deal. Next slide. And we also promoted it in all kinds of different ways. You can see that down there. The picture in the middle showing all the advertisements. That building, which is to me one of the heartbreaks of downtown Yakima, is that's the Pacific Power Building, which is on North 3rd Street. And you can see it was a really gorgeous building, and it's almost totally gone. But you had also all all the other promotional stuff. Next slide. And so, just to kind of sum up, we have a fair that has been going since, really, Mike, you're not totally wrong. Since 1892, it was part of Yakima. It's just that officially it didn't have your first one until 1894. Runs as the state fair till 1936. Then you have a 4-H fair, and then the Central Washington Fair to the present day. So it's been a really important part of the community, a real something that people look forward to. I happen to work at the Food Fair Fest on this last weekend, and there were certainly a lot of people who are missing the fair food and were there. So anyway, it was a pretty exciting time, and there used to be schools would be canceled for the fair. It's it's an important part of this community, and a lot of fun stories about how it works and what it does. So if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them. Otherwise, we'll probably heard enough of me. Thanks a lot.
And John, do you happen to know when the rides arrived? When did they start having all the?
Pretty early on, as soon as they could do anything, electrical, in the early 1900s.
John, have we done a poll of Rotarians who have been lost from their parents and had to go to the Standard Oil information booth?
Well, the only ones I know that were the ones where their parents, I think somebody like Bill and Sue Rich, tried to lose their children.
I don't blame them. At least one of them.
Well, thank you very much.
John, thank you. That has just been a remarkable program. To see some of those images is really, truly delightful. I know that the chat window is blowing up with compliments as well. So thank you, President-elect John. Really well done. And we appreciate you bringing such wonderful images and information to us today. Our next and final item on our agenda before we adjourn is a presentation of Rotarians Going Places from Sonea Lund.
Hello, fellow Rotarians and President Jennifer. My name is Sonea Lund, and I am so excited to announce 2 wonderful Rotarians Going Places for this week. The first one is one of my very favorite people, Quinn Dolan. On September 8th, Quinn was appointed to the Washington State Women's Commission. This commission was created in 2018 by bipartisan legislation to specifically address issues impacting women in Washington State. Quinn is the only commissioner from Central Washington, and as a matter of fact, no one from Central Washington has ever been invited to the table, and I know that Quinn will represent us very well. Congratulations, my friend. We are also very proud of you. The second wonderful Rotarian news is that on September 4th, Greg and Jan Loring became first-time grandparents. Daughter Megan delivered Dane Alexander, born 19 inches long and 5 pounds 11 ounces at 8:34 a.m. And his twin, Emily Victoria, also 19 inches long, 6 pounds 7 ounces, born at 8:36 a.m. Grandma Jan is definitely over the moon, in love, and both babies are healthy and happy. And their beautiful mother, Megan, and proud dad, JD, are doing great as well. Grandpa Greg and Grandma Jan are both bursting with pride. Welcome to the world, Dane and Emily. We can't wait to watch you grow up. And that are today's Rotarians Going Places.
Bravo. It's always so fun to share in the good news happening within our own Rotary membership. So keep those stories coming. We sure enjoy them. So next week, look forward to a program that's going to be 3 folks going to be speaking to us on affordable housing: Lowell Kruger, Ryan Ketchum, and Melanie Rosen. The following week, on the 8th of October, is Terry Pierce with the Washington Youth Academy. And on the 15th of October, we have Brandon Nichols speaking on private equity in agriculture. So some additional great programs that are coming your way. Our Rotarians are going places. And with that, again, just a reminder, please stop by and see us at the YMCA Yakima Rotary Aquatic Center tomorrow. Don't forget to restock your wine. Don't forget to pick up your roster inserts and all of those Operation Harvest items on that agenda. With that, we are officially adjourned. Thank you all.